Dr. G, I want to talk to you about a few items today, but why don't we start with something that we have been keeping an eye on a lot throughout the day, which is this story here that we've got of the CNN and their efforts to try to sort of subvert the media process here, and they're continuing to pick up allies along the way. And I don't get why they've got Michael Avenatti getting arrested. You got Jim Acosta making a fool of himself, and then he's getting defended by certain people. People are dying on this hill. I just want to get your thoughts on the state of play with the media.
How long do you have? Like a few hours?
Yeah, we're gonna tell Webb he can sleep in. We're gonna claim some of his hours today.
I don't think we call CNN media. It's not media. If it were media, there'd be more than 600,000 people watching it. I mean, 600,000 people, is less than 0.5% of the U.S. population. If you look at the latest the figures for viewers, the 25th show nationally was the first CNN show. So, Anderson Cooper, the star of CNN, came after Shannon Bream's show that airs at 11 o'clock at night on Fox. So it's just not news. It's advocacy. It's radical left propaganda. This is a network that has no problem, saying things like, Donald Trump didn't go to the cemetery in Paris because his hair might get blown out of the way. I mean, this isn't a news channel, and what they're doing is they're grandstanding. So, I think we give them far too much attention. They're risible. They don't do news reporting. They did. I mean, it's a shame. I remember watching in 1991 the beginning of the Gulf War with CNN's correspondent in Baghdad. That was news. They sent people out to actually report the news. They don't do that anymore. It's not Democrat advocacy, Alex. It's radical left-wing advocacy.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I don't know why the White House would not take away Jim Acosta's press credentials. And I got to say, I'm trying to be. This is why I critique the White House from time to time, Dr. G, because when I say stuff like this, people know there's nothing political in it. There's nothing bitter about it. It's just
it
simply...
It should have happened long ago. I mean, the patience of Sarah, the patience of the president, it should have happened long, long ago. If I were in that position, if I had Sarah's job or Bill Schein's job, that guy would have been escorted off the White House premises 6 months ago, at least.
Okay, so here's
the idea that he's suing. I mean, it tells you just how petty, vindictive, and un-American they are. That they're also suing the uniformed Secret Service officer to whom he had to hand his badge. That's Abilio Jim Acosta.
Yeah, people have been pointing out that his first name is Abilio, which it's fun to say. I do like saying Abilio. I want to say the problem is, Dr. G, is if I start saying Abilio, people will falsely accuse me of some sort of racism. So it's the.
But why is he ashamed of his ethnic heritage?
I don't know. It's a great question.
Why is Abilio ashamed of his ethnic heritage?
No, I tell you that I've been calling all the Roberts in my life Beto, by the way. So it's these names are fun to play. My dad's Robert. I call him Beto now. So luckily he's got a good sense of humor. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, luckily he's got a great sense of humor. Okay, so Dr. G, all right. So let's talk about. I want to talk about nationalism and patriotism in the context of Macron and his lecturing. And we have an incredible piece that's going to run on Breitbart News from my favorite professor from UC Berkeley, A.J. Greger, who a lot of our audience is familiar with because Dinesh D'Souza cites him frequently, a brilliant guy in his mid-90s. And he basically explains, as people read in the piece, and I'll talk about it in greater detail down the road, he talks about how this is such a false dichotomy between nationalism and patriotism, and not to mention the appeal to patriotism has been used essentially to not even have an allegiance to country, to have an allegiance to party. So a lot of the most radical left-wing regimes in history who want allegiance not even to China or not even to Russia, but to the Communist Party, for example. I mean, if you want to start playing these semantic games with the word nationalism and patriotism, you get a bone up on your history, Mr. Macron.
But it's much, much deeper than semantics, and it's much, much deeper than party politics. I look forward to the professor's piece. But let's be very clear here what happened in the last 400 years since the Westphalian system was put in place in 1648. The international system was constructed with the key components being nation states. We went from an era of empires, tribes, and city-states being the subjects of the international system to the modern nation-state, with citizenship becoming a modern concept. The loyalty of the individual was focused around the locus of the nation-state and eventually representative government. That is juxtaposed to pan-national ideologies, two of which should be obvious to all people who have are breathing and have a heartbeat. And of course, I'm talking about fascism and communism. And for Macron to make the statement that nationalism is bad when it was the nation state of America that saved France twice from a pan-national ideology. Actually, let's add the Cold War saved France 3 times from a deadly pan-national ideology is galling. It is the global ideologies of Karl Marx and of Hitler that deny the relevance of the nation state and try to destroy it for some ideology that will kill you if you get in the way. So the nation state is our last guarantee against totalitarian ideologies. And I would just ask Macron, does he think the members of the Maquis, the French resistance, have the same attitude if they were alive today to the concept of France as a nation? Which, by the way, if you've ever been there, they're very nationalistic in France. They
incredibly nationalistic, and the president was smart to make this point. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. I mean, they have quotas, Alex, for controlling how many English language pop songs are broadcast on private radio stations. You've got to have songs broadcast. I mean, that's the reality of how nationalist France is. And then they're lecturing us who saved their bacon 3 times in the last 100 years.
Yeah, that's exactly right, especially when the context of the World War I memorial, where the United States bailed out France, saved their freedom. We saved their freedom. And then we did it again in World War II. And then now we're getting lectured. And it's just such a lie. It's just such a lie that's being put out that this president is using nationalism in some sort of a racist way. He doesn't believe in some sort of a free press. He's really the totalitarian. It's all projection. It's the left that's got the totalitarian streak. They're the ones who don't want, who are the ones who are assaulting culture. It's not us.
Right, and to say that they need an army, it's laughable. Europe will never have an army. But to say they need an army to protect them from us, that is just the ultimate slap in the face. These are the nations that we paid for their defense since 1949 until the fall of the Berlin Wall and even past that. So, yes, this is a man who is tanking in the polls domestically. He is in his elitist bubble. He's trying to appeal to his elitist bubble, and also this is the new pan-national ideology, and that's the EU. In which, look at what happened. Is it today? Yes, today we see Brexit on the brink of failure because the elites are so committed to maintaining this unrepresentative cabal of bureaucrats in Brussels which will decide the future of all the people in the nations of the European Union. So this is the reality behind those statements. It is a fight between nation states that represent the will of the people and the elites that only represent their own interests.
Yes, and so a lot of language manipulation is taking place, and you're seeing the EU Council President refer to a brown shirt populism as if there's some sort of, a Nazi component to people who, I don't know, just think that maybe the people should have as big of a voice as the bureaucratic elite, many of whom don't even live or know anything about the countries that they're tasked with representing. That this is now makes you some sort of a Nazi, conflating white nationalism, which is not discussed ever on the right, aside from the context of how insane the media is to keep talking about it, with actual nationalism, which is essentially just America first meets we don't like the EU and the UN and other globalist bodies where unelected bureaucrats have control over the public. I mean, that's all it is. It's not that complicated. The media is it's all lies, Dr. G. They're not actually interested in trying to figure out what we mean.
Well, and there's actually, factual evidence, and your listeners to look this up. When you become so the EU has its commission, which is it's shocking. The European Parliament cannot initiate legislation. So the legislative body of the EU cannot initiate legislation. It is the unelected commission and the commissioners that can initiate legislation over the millions and millions of people that live in the EU. And when you become a commissioner of the EU, guess who you swear allegiance to? You are required in your oath of office to swear allegiance to the European Union over the interests of the nation passport you hold. That's actually in the requirements of becoming a commissioner. Now, have we seen echoes of this before? What ideologies deny the relevance of the nation state and worship something beyond it? We've seen this before many times, and it has cost so far 160 million lives. So that's why you see pushback from the UK. You see pushback from nations such as Hungary and Poland, which have been occupied for decades. And you're right. And these pejorative words, or words that are used in a pejorative fashion, such as populism or nationalism, they're only negative because populism, for example, must be defined today as any policy which the elite disagrees with. And if that's populism, so be it. So what we are seeing now with the Trump phenomena, with Brexit, is a reflowering, a reinvigoration of representative democracy. And the point, if you read the president's speeches, he says national sovereignty is good for all nations, not just us. If
That's
you
right.
are sovereign, whether you're Belgium, Israel, it doesn't matter. We will stand by you. And that's his message to the world.
Dr. G, we probably talked about this together a half a dozen times, and I've mentioned on the show probably 50 additional times. It's the nationalism is the simplest possible concept. It is, yes, half of it is America first, American exceptionalism. We have a great country. But the other half is that it's okay if you feel the same way about your country. It's okay if you want to organize based on your own, if you want to take pride in your own country. Why would you take pride in the EU? Why would you take pride in the UN? It's perfectly fine if you believe in some sort of a French nationalism. I don't, or I mean some sort of a French exceptionalism. Right. I don't believe in it, but that's your right. It's your right, exactly.
Right. And that was why that last line of the president's tweet on his way back from France was so superb. When he blasted them for their unfair policies on exporting and importing wines and so forth, and then he said, "Oh, by the way, make France great again." It's for everybody. It's a model for everybody, and we do not, want to undermine your national sovereignty. On the contrary, we believe that sovereign nation states are good for the international order.
Yes,
and that's what the elite can't stand.
They can't stand it, and that there's two alternatives. Either you're going to get nationalism, or you're going to get these. We call it globalism, but it's really about empowering bureaucratic, unelected elite who are not part of your country to govern what your country is. Those are the two options, and nationalism is the best way in terms of an international way of organizing things, in our opinion. That's why you see what's happening with Brexit.
400 years.
And let's talk.
400 years.
And let's talk about in the context of Brexit, Dr. G, because you've got, which is this deal is a total mess. No one's happy, which was inevitable. Right. And that's the point of joining these EU trade deals, where you've got a system where we're cutting a deal with 27 countries at the same time. It makes it impossible for you to get out of the deal. The Brexiteers are saying it's the worst deal ever. Nigel Farage is. And I'll tell you, the people in the establishment don't like it either. No one's happy. And this is why you don't get into stuff like the EU in the first place.
Think about this. So now 2 years after the referendum, the people chose. You have this half-baked, half-pregnant final package in which they are still beholden to the European Union, in which they are still meant to pay £40 billion into the European Union's coffers. For what exactly, we don't know. This is a testament to just how invidious the globalizing elite truly are, and how how leadership is required in the 21st century, and how the Brexit, how the will of the people has been betrayed by a very, very weak government. To have 2 ministers and 2 secretaries and a personal secretary resign on the same day tells you that they are in the thrall of the unrepresentative globalizing elite.
Yeah, and if you look over at our Breitbart London vertical right now, you'll get up to the minute coverage of this, and we'll bring you details. But it is a total drinking from a fire hose situation that we have right now. The Brexit minister Dominic Raab has quit, but he's just one of several others who've quit. Their pension secretary is the latest to go as well. So now you've got, it looks like it's getting close to 10 or 12 people now from May's cabinet have quit over Brexit at this point. And so I know that's kind of how they do business over there. They quit. They have dramatic shows of allegiance by quitting frequently, Dr. G. But what are the specific objections that are being raised right now?
The maintenance of a customs union, that Brussels will still have control over trade relations, and the biggest thing I think that was, in addition to the unfettered migrant ways into the UK, I think the big issue is money. These incredible amounts that the UK has paid into the EU coffers since it joined in when I was a child. When was it? The 70s. And now you're leaving, and the deadline is next February, and you're still required to pay tens of billions of pounds into the EU coffers. It's paying rent for a property that it's like a bad timeshare deal. That's the best way to think about it. And also not regaining your full sovereignty, which was what Brexit was all about originally.
Right. And so, again, both sides, because, of course, the Remainers don't want anything to happen, and the Brexiteers want a hard Brexit.
A real Brexit.
A pure Brexit. Well, this clearly is not that. So what do you think happens, Dr. G? What do you think happens next?
I think we'll see a vote of no confidence very soon against Theresa May. I can't predict the numbers, whether it will be sufficient to really require that she initiates a run against candidates for Prime Minister. I think this is a crisis for politics on the left and the right. When you have Jeremy Corbyn criticize how weak this Brexit package is, along with the hard Brexiteers, it means you will have an unholy alliance that will just cock the whole British establishment into a position where the current policies are untenable. And as such, I think, I pray that there will be a real hard Brexit. But the idea that you have to go back to the people and have them vote until they vote in a way that the elite approves, that's not British. And hopefully, the ghost of Churchill and the ghost of Maggie Thatcher will somehow exercise some influence on the disaster that is Theresa May's current Brexit package.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka, he is a author, he's a commentator, he's got a new talk show coming out, but most importantly, the new book, Why We Fight. Pick this up. Dr. G, anything else on your mind today you want to talk about with this audience?
I just, don't focus too much on the so-called palace intrigue stories. Take heart that we still have the Senate, the White House, a strengthened Senate. There was no real blue wave. Things are still going in the right direction. Iran sanctions are stronger than they've ever been. So, the MAGA agenda is still on the rails. And I think with people like Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff getting, positions of power in the White House, 2020 is a shoo-in for the good guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't go quite that far, but I do think it's a shoo-in if the president gets back to the agenda that he focused on in the campaign trail. I think if he does that, focuses on immigration, maybe takes a bite out of Obamacare and gets an infrastructure deal going. I think if he starts doing that and continues the incredible work he's doing on the judgeships, then I will agree with you. So let's see if that happens, Dr. G. But I'm in full agreement that palace intrigue stuff is not. It's not my cup of tea. Yeah. Well, we cover some of the basics, but it's not my cup of tea. So we don't do a ton of talking about it. I have one more question for you. Your thoughts on the caravan? So many lies about it, about how we can't put any National Guard or military or additional law enforcement or whatever on the border because it's 900 miles away. Well, they're here. They're scaling the wall or what little wall we have. They are not the women and children and Rhodes Scholars that CNN suggests. They are. They're 95% young men, as we could have anticipated. The cartels just must be laughing their behinds off right now. What are your thoughts?
I think it's, very significant, and it's good that we have a morale-boosting action such as Secretary of Defense, Marine Corps Legend Mattis at the border with our troops.
I agree.
I stress what Sarah Carter did, and Chris Farrell went to the caravan. They met with the intelligence services, the security services of the nations they're traveling through, and DHS has stated on the record just last week there are at least 300 known criminals in the first caravan, just the first caravan alone, and those are the ones we know of. This is orchestrated, this is a stunt, and this is an assault on the national. We're back at national sovereignty. It is an assault on the national sovereignty of the United States of America.
Yeah, and as I point out a lot, we won't belabor it today, but I pointed out a lot on yesterday's show. I think what's happening with the Macron speech and what's happening with Brexit and what's happening at the caravan, I do think they're all related. I mean, this is the
it's not an accident.
This is the big debate of our time: is globalism versus nationalism. Do nations matter? Do borders matter? And there's an increasing number of people, particularly of the elite, who really don't think it does anymore, Dr. G. And that's the fight that folks like you and I are engaged in right now.
You're absolutely right, and that will be the defining line. I think left and right are pretty irrelevant. It is versus the elitism, the nation versus the globalizers, the people who lost out as the elite made their billions, and that's going to be the defining fissure in modern politics for decades to come.
Well, thanks for all the time, my friend. Pick up the book, Why We Fight. Dr. Gorka, you'll be with us next week. It's Thanksgiving, so we'll have to figure out a way to squeeze you in around that, because always enjoy these talks.